Good morning. My name is Barbara Fuller, and as chair of the board, I welcome you to this July 18th, 2023 working session of the Washtenaw County Board of Road Commissioners. Our office coordinator, Aaron Smith, will describe how our meetings operate, how to access the agenda packet, and how people may participate remotely. Aaron.
Thanks, Chair Fuller. There are multiple ways to make public comment during today's working session, whether you're joining us in person or virtually. If you're here in person and would like to make public comment, please fill out the sign-in sheet now. If you're joining us virtually, we will ask you to raise your hand at the appropriate time in the agenda. If you're joining us virtually and are experiencing technical issues with audio or video during the meeting, submit a comment in the chat feature and our communications manager will help you troubleshoot. The audio and video of this meeting is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be posted to wcroads.org in the next few days. There are printed copies of today's meeting agenda on the table near the front door, and it is also posted on our website. And now I'll turn it over to Chair Fuller.
Thank you, Aaron. I now call this working session to order and ask if Aaron would please call the roll.
Chair Barb Fuller.
Present.
Vice Chair Rod Green.
Present.
Commissioner Gloria Yamas.
Present.
Commissioner Joanne McCollum.
Present.
And Commissioner Jeff Smurs.
Present.
The following directors are also in attendance: Managing Director Cheryl Siddle, Director of Engineering and County Highway Engineer Matt McDonald, Director of Operations Adam Lape, and Director of Finance and IT Dan Ackerman.
Thank you. We will proceed to the next item on the agenda, which is public comment. This is the time set aside on the agenda to receive comments from the public. This is not intended to be a period for dialogue. Each person will be allotted 3 minutes to address the board. Aaron will explain how people may be recognized to offer comments.
Thanks, Chair Fuller. Since this is a hybrid meeting with both in-person and virtual attendees, we will take turns between those attending in person and virtually. For virtual attendees, we have provided some instructions on the screen on how to participate and make public comment. If you're attending this meeting virtually and would like to make public comment, please raise your hand now. If you dialed into the meeting from your phone, you can raise your hand by dialing *9. Our communications manager will unmute virtual participants with raised hands one at a time and will announce your username or last 4 digits of your phone number when it is your turn to speak. Please share your name and address before beginning your comments. For in-person attendees, we will start with those who have signed up on the sign-in sheet as you walked in. If you didn't sign in, you're still welcome to make comment. I'll notify you when it is your turn. At this time, we do not have anyone that would like to make public comment.
Very good. We will move along. And Cheryl, I turn this over to you for your staff's presentations.
All right. Well, thank you. Good morning. And I'm going to very quickly hand it over to Dan Ackerman, our Director of Finance and IT. Obviously, our second quarter budget review is one of the most important things that we do each year. So I'd be happy to have Dan run through where we're at. He'll do a brief summary.
Good morning, Commissioners. Dan Ackerman, Director of Finance and IT. So this is one of my favorite times of the year. We get to talk about numbers and try not to throw too many at you, but a lot of good information there. Encourage you to ask questions at any point in time. Don't feel like you're interrupting, because we want this to be interactive if there are, if you have questions about certain items. And with that, I guess we can go ahead and get started. All right. So we're going to talk about an overview of 2022 second quarter budget for 2023. Sorry about that. I have a problem with years. I don't know why. Sometimes I'm a decade behind.
I make post-it notes or cards too.
Maybe, yeah. I'm trying to not use the note option for PowerPoint, but the second quarter 2023, just any proposed changes that we need to make, both revenues and expenditures. And then we're going to do a look ahead at 2024 and 2025. It's on the screen, so that way I can't mess it up. And so again, and I've said this before, this is just a snapshot as of today. Where do we think we are in 2024 and 2025? Certainly that will change tomorrow and the next day and so on. So we don't want to get too hung up on it. But it's always good to kind of look ahead and see where we feel like we're going. And we always are presenting almost close to a worst case scenario, so keep that in mind too. I fully expect our numbers to be better than what we're presenting to you today. But we, as you know, run a conservative budget, and hopefully, for those of you that have been on the board for a while now, our track record's kind of backing that up. And then we'll have another question and answer time. But like I said, if you have questions at any point, feel free to let me know, and I'd be more than happy to try and answer that. So overall, we have a fairly favorable outlook. If you recall, in the first quarter, we had better actual numbers in 2022 than we had budgeted, so we were able to add some things back to the budget. The winter's been fairly average, so nothing extreme there. But some of the things we're going to talk about in the second quarter is we're able to increase our revenue from townships, which is always great. And again, that's been a great track record we've had here at this agency. There's been some adjustments to some primary and local road projects. Some we had to carry over, some we were able to add. Equipment delays and carryovers, still struggling with supply chain with that. And I know you're all well familiar with that, as well as there's been some cost changes which have impacted, what we've been able to purchase or what we're planning on purchasing, but we'll talk about that as well.
Dan, one question.
Yes.
About the equipment delays.
Yes,
Now that doesn't show in the budget
correct.
until, the expense doesn't show in the budget until we actually receive the item.
We have to actually receive it. Mike Livesey, our equipment supervisor, has to say, yes, it's, road ready. And at that point, then when we pay the bill, then we can recognize it as an expense, correct?
Okay.
Yes.
Dan, do you want to, there's also usually two pieces to at least to the trucks. Cab and chassis versus the upfitting.
Yes. Yep. And so both pieces need to be completed. We receive it. And like I said, it's basically road ready that we can put it on the roads. And it's kind of an accounting thing as well. So pretty much we need to receive it and say we can start using it, and then we can recognize it as an expense at that point.
So until we receive it, what's it recognized as?
It really doesn't touch our budget. So,
Other than we're planning for it. We do budget
Well, right.
for it. We
Yeah.
plan on that coming in as an expenditure,
right.
but it's nothing right now. We can't even get like a VIN. That's not how the equipment works. So
Yep.
we're not even in line at this point.
I see.
We've
Yep.
spoken with the vendor. Supposedly but we have a place to order yet.
And when I meet with the operations department, when we talk about budget, we say, is there any possibility at all that we'll receive it in this year? If we do, we'll include it with this year's budget. If not, then it would be a carryover into next year.
I see.
So if there's any possibility at all, the sun, moon, stars align and yes, we can receive it, then let's keep it in the budget, because then the worst that would happen is we receive it next year and then we would carry it over the budget.
Thank you.
So these expenditures are in our budget that we approve.
Right.
We won't see payment until we get payroll and bills. Then we'll see the expenditure
Right.
actually
Yep.
occurring.
Right.
Thank
But
you.
anything that's outside of what we've already approved, Dan and Cheryl will typically say, so we're going to adjust this, you've added this in.
I see.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not overexpending.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Definitely not. Okay. Well, I'm kind of getting tired of talking about inflation, but yet it continues to be somewhat of a factor. Maybe not quite as bad as it was. And I've seen some indicators, maybe inflation's improving, but it still is having some impact. Michigan transportation funds, though, as we shared last month, they were up significantly with, obviously there were some adjustments and things, but Michigan transportation funds, fortunately, seems to be, pretty much on track. We use the state of Michigan's budget projections and maybe dial it back slightly. But we've not seen the state of Michigan saying, oh my goodness, inflation, or people aren't driving anymore, or cost of gas. We need to adjust the numbers. We've not seen that, which is great. So far, fingers and toes crossed. inflation doesn't seem to be impacting Michigan transportation funds. We do see it still impacting material costs, equipment, as I kind of just talked about, some project costs. So we are kind of dealing with that. Not sure when that will end completely, but we just want to make sure that we're planning accordingly. And as it says here, we'll continue to monitor for inflation, and if there's any other potential legislative things that come down the road, you know, we want to make sure that the budget isn't set in stone and it can be flexible based on anything that comes our way. Questions? Okay, township contributions. So our local road program, our township agreement program, I believe all 20 townships, you've seen those. And we're able to increase revenues from those township agreements by $4.5 million, which kudos to Adam and his staff. And again, I think this agency has a great track record of working with the townships and being great partners. You know, we've been making some grounds on the primary roads, the local roads, probably not as much, but this certainly helps when we can partner with the townships. You know, $4.5 million is significant. So we're glad to make those adjustments each year. So that'll be an increase for all those projects. We are adding the Moorville Road paving project, and York Township is contributing towards a portion of that. So we're glad we're able to make that happen this year.
And Moorville Road is a primary road, so we have a township that is contributing, basically paying 50% of a primary road paving project, which is a big deal. They do have no obligation to do that whatsoever.
A question?
Yeah.
Page 3 talks about 4.5 million additional in township revenues. But when I go to page 4, it's 5.290.
Right. So you have the 4.5, you have the 333,000 for Moorville, you have the Duvarn that I'm going to talk about from Ann Arbor Township. So that's
Okay.
that's a combination of all the township contributions,
Okay.
not just the township agreement.
Okay.
So does that
Thank
make
you.
sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it
Okay.
does.
Okay.
The $4.5 million is specifically to the local road program. That's the matching program, or starts as the matching program that this board funded in the beginning of the year. So we put 1.5 million in and assumed that the townships would take advantage and at a bare minimum match that money. So that was the original budget, was for 1.5 from the townships, 1.5 MTF that this board puts into that local road matching program. And we make no assumptions that they're going to do additional work. This is a reflection of the additional work. And that's what you see coming through on each of the township agreements, where they're using their matching dollars, but most of the townships are going well in excess of that. And anything that they're doing in excess is at their cost. So that's what this adjustment would be.
Yep. And then the township contribution category does include other things like these projects we're talking about. There are a few other projects that the township specific that the townships are contributing to as well. So that just gathers everything.
That's where I got stuck.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure. No problem.
Thank
Good
you.
question. Yep. So there's the Duvarn special assessment project, and that's also going to be a contribution from Ann Arbor Township, about $374,000. And then obviously with these projects, we're running them. So there would be a corresponding increase in expenditures as well. Okay. Federal state funds, there's the North Territorial at Webster Church road project that we're delaying to 2024. The revenue portion, we're decreasing by about $600,000. And it says corresponding decrease in expenditures, which is true, but it's actually the expenditures. There was a road commission road commission only expense. So do you remember the total cost of the project, Matt? About over $1 million over that we're transferring to next year for expenditures, and then the federal aid of about $600,000.
Commissioner McCollum.
So the budget revisions,
Mhm.
where it talks about federal state funds.
Yep.
So that 587, so your recommended budget for 23 is 12017, and then next year you'll put on that 587.
So, right, we transfer that to next year, correct? Yep,
Okay.
and that's in a listing of projects we're looking at for 2024.
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
okay. Talk expenditures. And I believe we shared this at one of the previous board meetings. We did receive about $50,000 from our County Road Association Self-Insurance Fund or Workers' Compensation. And, you know, we did receive a check for that amount. And so that is actually a decrease to our workers' comp costs for the year. So, which is great. We were able to add the Prospect Road culvert for about $169,000. And I believe that's road commission only, Cheryl, right? Yes. Capital outlay. There's an aerial lift truck that's again, per Commissioner Green's questions, that we know for a fact we will not receive it in 2023. So we want to delay that or carry over those monies to 2024. So it's about $204,000. As far as our heavy trucks, we're fingers and toes crossed that we will receive them this year. But you can see we did reduce the number, not the dollars, but the number of heavy trucks from 11 to 8. We're seeing increased costs with these trucks. And so now, unfortunately, instead of 11, we only have 8 for the budgeted amount. Does that make sense?
How does that impact our ability to do what we need to do? Or does it at all?
$1 million question. Well, Adam, you want to?
Or $3 million question.
Adam Lakewood, Director of Operations. So actually, we're okay right now. So when all this was set into motion a few years ago for 11 trucks, that was a final shot in the arm to get everything above our 10 years, 100,000 miles that you'll hear from me as we talk again here in about a month. Well, less than a month now, a few weeks from now at the next working session. The reduction to 8 trucks will be as if we bought 4 trucks a year for the last 2 years.
Okay.
So in theory, it keeps us in step with where we want to go. We need to keep boosting that as we go, but it'll be okay for right now. We're making it through with the trucks that we have. Hasn't been the easiest, but that's why we're excited to at least get the 8 here this year and get those built up and start using them. But we'll be okay. Our functionality will still be effective.
Yeah, Adam will get into a lot more detail at our next working session because we'll do a review of equipment and facilities at that time. But we were trying to sort of do that balance of still staying within the budget that we have because we didn't really feel comfortable going much beyond that.
Right.
And still trying to keep up with equipment and stay on a replacement schedule that we can adhere to. So this works. It's like Adam said, it's
Yeah.
not ideal, but it works.
Yeah, not the ideal scenario we set out with a few years ago, but it's the reality of it. So, you know, we've made some lemonade out of a lemon and with the delays. So we'll keep moving on the road, but we have a great shop. Those 8 will keep us on the road for the stuff that's getting a little older. So it'll be good.
So
Commissioner Smers.
is the plan so you're replacing trucks, you're not getting new ones, you're just replacing in the fleet? You're not getting additional trucks?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. This is just, it's usually 1 for 1.
Right.
As
Okay.
we go. We do retain spares that if we have one that's decent mileage, we'll retain, or some life left in it, we'll retain 1 or 2. But it all depends on
It's not
when
gonna
we
leave
get them.
you short trucks, you're just gonna have
Correct.
an older truck, okay.
Correct.
That
Yeah,
makes
we
sense.
try to keep some older ones with, you know, a little bit of life left in them for our spares that we refer to,
Hmm.
which I kind of talk a little bit more to that in August, but it's still something extra. So when we have 50 of them out on the road, we have 1 or 2 sitting that can go out and usually come out of this yard or Southeast Service Center. We have the majority of our crews.
And that gets to our service delivery that I think Commissioner Green was asking
Yeah.
about, making sure that we're at least at a point where we can continue to provide the service.
Yeah, we don't really accept, you know, not being able to go out on the road. So we always try to keep something that'll move snow and salt for us and spread that on the road. So We work pretty hard for that, so we try to keep a couple kind of in our pocket, so to speak.
And Commissioner Green, just want to point out too, before all the supply chain issues and so on, we had a fairly aggressive replacement plan. We were purchasing between 4 and 8 trucks a year. So I think that's maybe helping us buy some time a little bit. And fortunately, we did that as well. We recognized that our fleet was aging and so on. And so we had a bit of an aggressive program in place, and I'm glad we did. And hopefully we can get back to, you know, at least the 4 trucks a year at some point. So.
Thank you.
All right. So just to summarize 2023 Q2, so we had deficit spending about $8.4 million as of the first quarter budget that we presented to you, and that's actually decreasing to 7.6. But again, some of that is carryovers, but you know, it still puts us in a pretty good spot, about a little over $14 million in projected fund balance, which is about 14% of expenditures, which is a bit on the lean side, but you know, there's no cause for alarm from me. We have plenty for emergencies. Again, I think this represents closer to a worst case scenario. I fully expect by the end of the year that you know, these numbers to be higher. So, you know, I feel like overall, I think we're in a pretty good spot.
Commissioner McCollum.
I was looking at that fund balance. I thought it was good. So it's always good to be higher though, right?
Yeah, I mean, Plant Moran says between 15 and 25%
Oh, okay.
of expenditures. So again, we're a bit on the lean side, but it, you know, feeling like this is conservative. And obviously there's a lot of work we want to accomplish too. You know, I'm not concerned, and I believe the leadership team all feels pretty strongly that we're in a good spot right now.
Thank you.
Commissioner Green.
And so the expectation is that MTF funds will kind of remain the same.
Yeah, about as budgeted. You know, it's actually trending slightly higher, which is what we want. You know, the actual is trending a little bit higher than what we budgeted. And obviously we watch it very closely. So if it were to change when we talk about year-end numbers, we can adjust it at that point. But right now, I think it's trending just fine, not only for 23, but 24 and 25 as well. So.
And some of that goes back to the 2015 gas tax increase. They actually finally did put an index in there for inflation. Now the index is capped, and it's capped at 5% or inflation, whichever is the lower number. So when inflation was really high, it still wasn't keeping up, but at least it's doing something. We have not previously seen that indexed to inflation. So it is nice to at least see the MTF somewhat trying to keep up.
And I'm sure I've asked this question before, but is there going to be any continued impact with the influx of electric vehicles?
I would say absolutely. When that would make significant impacts is anybody's guess. You know, it's my hope that the legislature is talking about alternative ways of funding. I know some states have looked at that and are running pilot programs. But it's a tough discussion to have, because, you know, it could be a game changer. You know, again, we're looking out into 2025. I don't see that it's adversely impacting us yet. I imagine if trends start to change, if the state gets nervous about the out years, they would, you know, there would be some alarms raised, and, you know, here's the new estimates. When we take a moment to digest that, but so far I've not heard it, but I think, you know, it isn't something that should be ignored. And I hope that they're actively searching for other solutions, because, you know, I think it's going to be more and more of a reality.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we'll continue on here. So we'll look at 2024 and 2025. So MDOT does a good job of providing budget estimates for Michigan transportation funds. They usually do a couple of out years, which is perfect for our purposes. They usually revisit it a couple times a year. On the rare occasion, if there's been some major changes that they've seen, they provided some updates, but it's usually in February, I think in August maybe, that they provide estimates, and we use those. We maybe dial it back slightly, being conservative, not a whole lot, but just slightly. Those have been a good guide for us. And obviously we use the trends here at the Washtenaw Road Commission. We compare month to month for the previous year. And sometimes we'll go back a couple of years just to see what our trends are looking like. But so we're using those assumptions, and Commissioner Green, they do show a slight increases in 24 and 25. And so let's hope that continues. And to your question, I'm sure if they felt the EVs were impacting things, then they would revise their budgets accordingly. So for 2024, we've included all the county millage work, but as you know, that's the last year of the voter approved millage, and next year will be up for renewal. We're hopeful that it gets on the ballot and is approved. And at that point in time, we would add it to our budget projections for 2025, but conservatively, we've not included it with our numbers for 2025. And also, Matt has shared with you all the federal and state projects that are coming our way. And so we've made sure to include all those in our projections for 2024, 2025. As you know, sometimes there is a road commission contribution to some of those. So we want to make sure that we're budgeting for all that. Any questions on that? Okay. We're also assuming all of our pension and OPEB obligations. Very, very important, of course. We've made, promises to our employees and retirees. And there are extra payments we're trying to make, as you know, to make sure we can address any unfunded liabilities. Those are also included in projections for both 24 and 25. As we talked previously, having our updated fleet as best we can is important for the maintenance of this county. And so we have about $3 million in the out years for road equipment purchases. And again, something very important, we want to invest in our fleet and do what we can, but managing all the competing interests that we have as an agency. So,
Commissioner Green?
And there are no county millage projects because that millage has not been approved.
Correct. The current millage expires in 2024.
Right.
Yep.
And we don't want to make a false prediction or assumption
Mhm.
that it will be passed in 24 to take effect starting in 25.
Absolutely.
right. Yeah. And it's pretty simple. We could certainly add it back fairly easily. We've done that before with the previous millage, and so it wouldn't be too difficult to add it back into the budget. So. Right. Well, I guess I will talk about inflation because again, we don't know where the heck that's going, and it is a factor. So we want to make sure we're addressing that. So the departmental budgets, when you look at the wages, we do have projected increases in there based on contracts and so on. Just to make sure that we cover that. We have assumed all full-time equivalent employees of the organization. It'd be great. I don't know if we've ever been to 100% fully staffed, but obviously we want to budget for that. So we budget all full-time equivalent employees 100%, and with the inflationary increases for the wages. There's been a lot of discussion about the ARPA funds, and so we're thinking the program is going to be about $1.4 million. I believe they require agreements with townships for each of the projects that we're doing. So we're anticipating that program will be about 1.4 million, and the township contribution would be $1 million. So then the road commission would put in about 400,000. in that, so.
Commissioner Green?
What does the acronym stand for? ARPA?
American Rescue Plan Act.
Thank you.
Those are federal monies?
Yes.
Good question. I didn't know that. So,
I'm always, when I see.
yeah, that's
Acronym.
Yeah, right.
what's the-
Yeah,
that's-
yes, yes.
These are the federal dollars that came out a couple of years ago that went to most levels of government, but did not go to road commissions. So the state received ARPA funds, the county received almost over $70 million in ARPA funds.
72, yeah.
And the townships each received ARPA funds, but the road commission did not receive any ARPA funds. And then this particular program is one that actually we worked with Evan Pratt's office, Water Resources Office, on priorities. And that's how the county was deciding where to spend money, was establishing different priorities. So stormwater management was one of the priorities that was identified, and the county is allocated $2 million towards this particular program. So we benefit because most of that work is going to take place on local road culvert replacement programs. So that's, and we've been assisting the townships, but ultimately the townships do have to apply to Water Resources Office. They're the applicants or recipients of these additional ARPA dollars. But we would enter into an agreement. Much of that work would be done under direct force. So again, and finally, those are assets at the end of the day that are ours. So we are benefiting from it, but in a very indirect route.
Thank you.
So you can expect to see a lot of agreements for those in the next couple of years.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so for the budget projections, as far as fund balance, deficit spending, in 2024, we do have about $8 million deficit spending projected. Again, keep in mind, there are some carryovers from this year already. The deficit spending for 2025 is a little under $1 million. And that would leave us with a fund balance of about 5.1 million at the end of 2025. Again, that's lower than necessarily we'd like to see it, but we certainly feel with the conservative nature of our budgeting that you know, it will be more than the $5.1 million. You know, there is some flexibility with projects, with road equipment, with our extra payments we're making for our OPEB and our pension. There are some, you know, changes we could make to some of those if we had to. We would certainly not want to, but I'm just telling the board that, you know, if we were concerned about the numbers, there is some flexibility there that we could make some changes to positively impact our fund balance. So as it says here, this represents probably close to a worst case scenario, but staff still felt comfortable with the $5.1 million that, you know, it's still, you know, relatively healthy, or again, you know, you want fund balance in case of emergencies and so on. And so we felt that if all these numbers played out the way they did, you know, we would still be okay as an agency.
I have a question. Back a couple of slides, you said Q2 of this year, projected fund balance.
Yeah.
14.1 million.
Correct.
But in 25, only 5.1.
Yes, correct. Mhm.
That makes me nervous.
Yeah, well, so 2024 is really the big one with the $8 million deficit spending, which, you know, that significantly brings down the 14 million. But just the level of work that we want to accomplish. Again, there were some 2023 things. There was the aerial lift truck that we're carrying over into 2024. So again, we're not spending it in this year. So carrying it to next year, there's that federal aid project that we're carrying over into next year, which made that deficit spending increased some more. So if we were able to accomplish it this year, then there'd be a little more deficit spending this year. So like I said, the 5.1 is not, I mean, we'd rather it be 20 million, but again, with all the work we want to accomplish as an agency, you know, the project load that we have, the investing in our fleet and facilities, the investing in our people as far as our pension. That's kind of where the numbers played out. I can tell you I think more in 2025, there were some things that we would like to do that we said we can't justify including it at this point. So there were some things that we already took out of the budget, but you know, again, the 5.1 doesn't make me you know, feel like, oh, the sky is falling at this point. Because of our good track record, because again, we do have flexibility if we needed to remove things and we're concerned where the direction of our fund balance was going.
Because if 14.1 is 14%,
Mhm.
what's 5.1?
It's about 6%, I believe.
Which is way.
Which is
below
low.
What's
Yes,
recommended.
yeah, it is low. And again, this is just a snapshot in time.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate you.
So a
saying
little
that.
bit building on what Dan was saying on the philosophy of how we are typically budgeting, especially for these out years. A lot of what we do takes some time to get there as far as starting to plan for some of our bigger federal aid projects, or whether it's getting in line for some of our equipment. And so we have to sort of start preparing now for some of these out year things. What I've asked staff to do is to just put everything on the table right now. In a perfect world, what all do we want to do? And we're all estimating pretty high right now as well, because inflation has been high. We've had some challenges with getting things, all of that. So we've got multiple layers of conservatism, so to speak, from a budgeting standpoint that are being taken into account. And we're assuming we're doing pretty much everything that we want to do in some of those out years. Like Dan said, we already know where we would start trimming things back. If indeed all of this is playing out to be more like reality, I don't think any of us are comfortable with ultimately that truly being a $5 million fund balance. So what we would start to do is we're getting closer and saying we really are tracking the way we had budgeted here. We would start to cut some things here. So you would see different decisions being made. But if we don't start now with some of at least planning for this work, we won't be able to accomplish it in 2025.
So that's a wish list budget.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I would say it's a wish list.
Okay.
And, you know, again, our track record is usually our final numbers, actual numbers come in better than budget, and we're able to add some things back. You know, you never know. Could it be a severe winter, or, you know, the Dexter tornado, or what have you? There are some surprises we have. I mean, we are budgeting for those, but you know, there could potentially be game changers where we'd have to revise all of our numbers if we were not feeling comfortable with the direction that they were heading.
Yeah, and there will be multiple bites at the apple here as we go along, because we will be, as we're getting closer to the end of this year, we don't typically do a third quarter budget review. We're already starting to truly look at what the final year end would look like for 23 and the preliminary budget for 2024. So that's going to be pretty detailed, and this board will see that. Then we would do a first quarter and second quarter going through 2024. Staff's closely monitoring all of those numbers, but this board's going to see those budgets as well and making decisions. And then this time next year, again, we'd be doing the same thing, looking at 25, 26. So it's a continuous process, and there's multiple opportunities to take a look. And if this board's ever feeling like, well, time out, this is not the direction that we want to go, we can make different decisions at that point in time.
Commissioner McCullough.
So is this the projection including the millage that may pass, or?
2024 has the last year of the current millage. 2025 does not.
So this fund balance in the 2025 doesn't include if the millage may pass.
Right.
If the millage did pass, what would?
If it does pass, then that's a good thing. We would add all the numbers back. A lot of it is a wash to our budget. If staff time is being reimbursed with any of these projects, then that could potentially be a positive impact. It's more just the numbers, you know, the other contributions number would go up by, you know, $4.5 million to recognize those millage projects, and then a corresponding expenditure increase.
And if inflation continues to trend in the right direction, that fund balance may increase as well. true, maybe.
Yes,
Correct.
yeah. So again, we approach a lot of this conservatively.
Absolutely.
And if it starts trending the other way, which hopefully it has to happen at some point. I actually heard that some of the grocery store prices were coming down for certain things. So that sometimes that's an indicator, right? So if that were to trend in a positive direction, then, you know, we want to update things accordingly. And that's why I always caution, when we look at the out years, these are snapshots. It's going to change by tomorrow. So we try not to get overly focused on it. But like Cheryl said, there's some projects, say some federal aid projects, we want to make sure that we're planning for now. But we can certainly change things fairly quickly should, you know, inflation change, the state of Michigan finds some more money somehow, the millage is approved, whatever the case may be, we want to be flexible and be able to incorporate any of these changes.
I have two questions.
Yes.
What's the inflation factor you're using in these budget? What percentage are you?
I want to say it's about 4%.
4%.
Yep. For each year, so 4% in
Okay.
24 and 4% in 25.
And I trust you completely, but on the record, that fund balance in 2025 won't wash with me when it comes time to approve that
Yes,
budget.
and
So,
as Cheryl said, we would probably never have an actual budget
right. I just think it's
to ask the
important.
board to approve that had a fund balance of $5 million. We would probably never even entertain that.
Okay.
But again, looking at projections, we felt okay knowing worst case scenario. Hopefully you feel a fairly proven track record as far as
Absolutely.
what we've, you know, our budgeting process from years prior. And again, if it was really trending towards that, there would probably unfortunately have to be more changes to, we would look at projects, we would look at capital purchases. We look at these extra payments that we're making that we're not required to make sure that all of us feel comfortable about the budget we're asking the board to approve.
Thank you.
Yeah, you would kind of chuckle if you saw some of the meetings that our senior staff sit in when we just go, well, that's easy. That's now zero, and that would be zero, and that would be zero, and that would be zero.
Cheryl gets out a red pen.
And I would guess that you have that list of, so.
Yeah, there's an unfunded
prioritization of-
unfunded lists.
Yes.
We've got probably several unfunded lists
Okay,
Deferred lists.
for different.
Yes.
Yes.
okay. Commissioner Green, did you have a question?
No,
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Any other questions?
If
Commissioner
you're going to the questions, yes. Page 5, where it's QT update, the revenues for the first 5 months of the year, are approximately 3% higher than budgeted. Was that from the permits that you had some extra permits that you had to give out for utility purposes or whatever, I'm thinking?
So you're not referring to Michigan Transportation Funds?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Actually, I
Yeah.
am.
Okay,
Sorry.
yeah, that's what I thought, and that's the Michigan Transportation Funds. That's the monthly spreadsheet that we share with the board. And we compare this year to last year, and it's about 3% higher, and it is trending where we budgeted, so.
That's why you were saying the inflation wasn't affecting
Right.
that.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Exactly, yeah.
Any questions for Dan that we haven't covered? Okay,
Well, before we move away from this or finalize our discussion, the next steps would be at the first meeting in August, we'd have a second quarter proposed budget adjustments for the board to review and hopefully approve. If anything were to change significantly between now and then, especially with the adjustments, any proposed adjustments, we would share that with the board. If there was something that we had missed or something changes, we would make sure we would communicate that with you. Otherwise, you would see kind of what you're seeing now. Some of the actual numbers, I've not closed the books yet, so some of the actual numbers will change, but it's more any proposed recommended adjustments. If they were significant, we would, and probably even if they're insignificant, we would share that with you you know, if anything changes between now and that meeting in August. So, okay. So I'd also like to acknowledge Matt and Adam. We've had some great meetings as a leadership team. And as Cheryl said, sometimes those can be difficult because we may have to get the red pen out because, you know, we don't want it to say 0 in 2025. Let's at least have it say $5 million or, you know, whatever we need to get to. But they also their staffs do a great job. I meet with their departments, and usually everybody has homework or you know, we'll ask questions of Jeff Mann in the stock room about certain items. And, you know, sometimes they look at the budget a little differently than I do, and you hope we arrive at the same conclusion. If not, we had some good discussions, but, you know, we kind of check and balance each other. And, you know, I think it's a really good process. We started looking at the numbers even earlier, just a preliminary look at everything. I think that's been helpful too. And tried to utilize the technology with sharing of information. So at any point in time, they can look at some of the numbers and make little comments and things. So, but I think it works really well. But there's a lot of effort that they and their staffs put into to go into all this. And you know, we want to have it something that staff can stand by, and hopefully the commissioners feel comfortable with, although Barb heard you loud and clear about 2025. But we, you know, ultimately as a team want to feel good about the numbers we're presenting to you. And, you know, I think if you ask them, they would agree with us, but, the whole process has been good, and we continue to refine it. You know, there's probably still improvements we can make to it, but I certainly appreciate their efforts. So. And that's all I have, unless there's any other questions.
Anything else you want to tell us?
I'm good.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Great. All right, we're
right.
running.
We're actually ahead of schedule here,
Yeah, aren't we?
about 15
Yeah.
minutes ahead of schedule.
Yeah. Do you want to take a break, folks? 2 minutes? Sure. 5 minutes. Let's be back here ready to convene at 10 o'clock. Welcome back, everybody. We're going to get started a minute early. Woohoo! We're going to talk now about the 2024 County Road Association draft legislative priorities. Everybody should have gotten copies of those, and I hope we have some items people want to talk about or suggestions for new inclusions. This will be covered more extensively. We'll have an opportunity to cover it more at our August Southeast Council meeting, where Scott Marilat, who chairs this work group, will be present. So with that, Cheryl, do you have any lead-in you want to offer? Or?
Just that this is basically a living document. It's updated each year. And as Commissioner Fuller was indicating, the process really is that CRA staff takes the previous year's legislative priorities. They take the first stab at updating it, which is what you see here before you. And that is with the general guidance of the General Policy Committee, which Scott Marilat chairs, as well as chairing our Southeast Council meeting. He's also on that legislative or General Policy Committee, I believe is the name of that committee. So it's distributed to each of the districts. So we'll see it at our Southeast Council meeting. Each of the districts then has an opportunity to comment upon, add to, as far as the document goes. So it starts to become almost a rainbow colored document as you see the different councils making changes to it. And then that's all funneled back up to CRA staff. And then ultimately that's worked out into a final draft that gets approved at the annual meeting, which is typically in March. But this, as Commissioner Fuller indicated, is the beginning steps of it. So if there's any changes that we would like to see as an organization, we need to bring them to the Southeast Council meeting in August. And that is our opportunity to attempt to amend this document as it stands right now.
Although comments are going to be accepted all along. It's just, this is our,
They are, but they prefer that they go through the councils and then the councils only meet quarterly. So if it isn't now, then if it comes through Southeast Council, that would be in November, would be the next opportunity.
but that's still before the annual meeting at
Correct,
the
that is
hybrid
correct.
conference in March
is
of
correct.
24.
Yes.
Okay, okay. Thank you for that overview. Commissioners, do you have anything you want to point out, ask about?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner McCollum?
but just the document itself, I was just wondering, has it already been altered because of the way
Which
the
one?
purple
Yeah, purple are the
areas
changes that have already been
already?
put together by staff.
I
would
believe
think, at
that what
CRA.
you see before you is staff, CRA staff having
Mhm.
updated the 23 document to what they would be initially proposing as the 24 document.
I
That
see.
was done by CRA staff. There's certain things that actually were accomplished. Legislation was passed. So
Mhm.
those are some of the things that you see deleted out of the document altogether. But yes, those are staff edits at this point.
Okay. Keep going. That's all right.
So there was a
What
lot.
page?
I don't have a page. It was a lot to read here, but I am concerned about the brine guidelines and conditions that they're going to, that are laid out for us. Is that in here to try and change that?
I don't remember seeing that. It's
Neither.
there's actually been some kind of isn't there a committee that's been formed to work directly with, is it Eagle?
That is correct.
On sorting this out and helping them understand the impact of some of the changes they proposed,
That is correct.
which I'm sure Commissioner Green remembers from the negotiating committee. That was a very robust discussion at the highway conference in March about
About the brine.
the brine
Oh, yes, it was.
regulations.
Mhm.
I don't think
Central
there's-
issue Almost.
Yeah, I don't think there's been any resolution, as in lowercase r resolution to that concern, although it's been paused.
It's
As I
been
understand
paused.
it.
What I don't remember is how long it's been paused, when that was to be revisited. And that is actually something Adam could answer. Since he has been part of the committee or the group that, and I think it's, I don't even know if it's an official committee. It really has been more of a loose group of people that have been sitting down with Eagle. I believe that's more on the administrative side of things than on the legislative side of
see.
things,
Mhm.
because we're dealing with Eagle as the entity Eagle, as opposed to the legislation that would govern Eagle per se, but it is a very important topic. And if you'd like, I can see if Adam could present at some point here in the near future, just of where it's at, what that means to our organization. Obviously, we support CRA in a lot of what is taking place. But we also believe that we could actually operate within a certain amount of the regulations that they are proposing. So it is a balance, and we recognize the importance of, environmental. I think everybody does at some level, but
Right.
that how important that is to our community. But there are definitely some things in there that are of things to be concerned about, especially from the permitting side of things.
I would like to have more information on that, because I
Mhm.
don't think a lot of people are aware of what's being introduced to replace the brine or how to replace the brine. And I think people would be just as concerned about that as what the tests are saying the brine is doing. So I would like to hear more about that. I am surprised that I know working with Eagle and it's more administrative, but I think it should be taken to a legislative point, because that includes more of the constituents, I would believe,
Okay,
in speaking about this matter.
right. So you have Adam give us an update maybe in August.
Yeah, we can certainly see timing wise where we're at. If hopefully it's something else that we could squeeze in, even if it's just a little update on it. It can very quickly turn into a complicated topic, but we can give an overview, and then if there's additional information, we'll continue to come back and educate, because it is a complicated topic. And there's multiple components to it, the brine discussion. There's the dust suppression, which this time of year, we get a lot of those calls. So brine is critical for that purpose, but then we also use it for winter maintenance, snow and ice. And so there are definitely two components to the brine discussion.
Thank you.
Commissioner Green?
Just kind of curious. How often do we meet directly with our local state legislators and ask them directly about things that impact us as a road commission? Not just in South, I guess in Southeast Michigan.
Well, we had our legislative reception here. We had the legislative reception there. And I think with our state legislators, you stay in touch with our county commissioners pretty closely and our state legislators as the need arises.
It's been very topic specific,
Right.
with the exception of like a Roads Plus event that might take place where that's more of a collective effort on behalf of CRA and the Roads Plus group.
You know, we talk to them, we say hi, we meet and greet, but on issues that but the Brinish commissioner McCullough talked about, do we really talk to them? I said, hey, I want you to push this issue, or think about this issue, or do some research on this issue.
Well, I think at this point, it's in the hands of Eagle and the folks from CRA that are advising. I mean, there's some accommodation, it feels like to me, that's underway in terms of, we also have to remember there's a new director of Eagle.
Okay.
Who's a very strong environmentalist, by the way. So, I mean, in terms of us talking to our legislators, I feel strongly we need to be very closely aligned with what CRA is saying and doing so that
I
we
get
don't
that.
step in it.
Absolutely.
Speak with.
Anything
voice.
to add?
Right.
No, agreed. And that's really the point of these legislative priorities,
Right.
is to try to keep us all 83 counties with different priorities, different backgrounds, different needs, but trying to speak with one voice. So this is why this is our opportunity to make sure that Washtenaw County has at least its input into the process. But for example, on that legislative breakfast that we had this past spring, or at the any of the legislative events, I know CRA typically will put their talking points together, and we did when we invited the legislators. First and foremost is to have that relationship in place. So if any of these topics come up, ideally, these folks are reaching out to us to say, what does this mean to you? Here's a transportation topic. And how does it impact the Washtenaw County Road Commission? Because we are the transportation entity for those legislators. So first is to have that relationship. But we did attempt to have at least a few talking points. For you had inquired earlier about electric vehicles. We encouraged the legislature to continue to look at funding so that it's sustainable in the future. We don't believe that the current gas tax model is going to last much longer before it truly does have the electric vehicles and reduced vehicles miles traveled collectively start to truly have an impact on that revenue source for us. But that's an example where we want to make sure that we have those talking points at our hands. And if that comes up as a topic, our legislators, again, know where to reach out and what our opinion would be on it. But we do try to stay aligned with CRA on most of those topics.
Do you want the brining issue, and I'm not sure how it would be framed or phrased, incorporated into the legislative priorities somehow, or at least the issue raised as a
Yeah.
potential addition?
Yes, because I
Okay.
think
Okay.
that we're only seeing,
Okay,
most people only seeing one side, and I think they need to see the whole picture.
okay. Is that something you will convey to Scott, Cheryl, or how do you want to handle?
I can ask him.
Okay.
I can ask him where does he see that going anywhere within this? Has there been
Document,
discussion? Was
yeah.
there a reason to specifically omit it, actually?
Right,
You know, I
because-
mean, that may be equally important to understand.
My understanding is kind of like pending. And it could be pushed out, and I think that would be concerning for all road commissions to have that kind of guideline in not using brine and doing other things.
Yeah, and that's that, the power of some of the state agencies that are out there,
Mhm,
right? I mean, they're administrative agencies
Mhm.
and those types of rules. They don't take they don't have to have
Yeah.
legislation behind
Yeah.
them, that the legislature has empowered that particular department to make those types of rules that directly impact us on a
Mhm.
day-to-day basis.
Mhm. Thank you. Yes.
Commissioner Yamas.
So on that topic, I think early on I asked, had we considered beat or other forms?
Right.
And I believe there was an issue about cost, right? Because I asked about alternatives to brine because of the economic
Considerations.
yeah, the economic considerations and so I didn't know if that was something part of the CRA so that it could be subsidized somehow, that if there was a switch from brine, could that happen? In what cases it could happen, if it's even feasible? You know,
Right, and that's an example. I mean, we, as an organization, continue to pay close attention to different products that are out there, the pros and the cons. Certainly cost is a factor, but there's actually environmental impacts to using beet juice as well. So, I mean, each of these has to be balanced on what is going to work best for our organization. And again, the different impacts that are out there.
Right.
Some of this may, fall under, I know there's an innovative, or whatever that was, is one of the top sections out here to set up an innovation. They've got it at the state level. I think a lot of that's more for road construction and that type of a thing, but perhaps from an operational perspective, there'd be an opportunity as well. There are definitely counties that are experimenting on their own at their own, either getting a grant from a different entity or they're doing it at their own cost and experimenting with things like beet juice, and different products that are out there, to see which ones are going to best meet their needs.
What else? Commissioner Smers?
The only thing that stood out to me was lost my page on it, where the removing animals.
Oh, the dead animal.
Yeah.
I could just see a significant cost increase there.
Yeah, that's on page 15 and 16, I think, in the document. My notes are right.
Not that I enjoy seeing animals on the side of the road, but nature does take its course.
Right.
Like, it is.
And in one of the latest, in the loops, there was reference made to the conversations about that. So this may need updating by the time we get together in August.
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion. There's a couple of counties up north where it's really been an issue. For our organization, frankly, we do very little removal. Like you said, for really the cost involved in it, for the most part, we will only deal with it if it's in the traveled portion of the roadway, and usually we're just moving it to the side, and letting nature take its course. Not only because of the cost, but also because of the exposure to our staff. That's not a pleasant, nor, I mean, there's a lot of issues associated with that.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Other things? I have a few questions. There were many deleted sections in this document. And I rely on you, Cheryl, and your team to say, whoa, wait a minute, why did that get cut out of there? We want to keep that. So I have on pages 6, 7, there were deleted sections about MTF funding. On pages 8 and 9, there was rural STP money section deleted there. And I think what they did was clean it up and consolidate, but there's sometimes our nuances that go right by me. Also on page 14, where they talk about weight permits, I don't believe they mentioned anything about the agricultural exemption. Don't I remember that there was a bill introduced by Representative Lisinski at the request of, was it Dan Shibley here, to exempt farm equipment from weight restrictions? I don't think that was mentioned in here. Maybe it doesn't need to be. I don't know.
So I guess a couple different things
Now,
there.
tell me to stop. or
Well, no,
one at a time.
it's all good. I can answer some of them specifically on why they were deleted. Some, most of the true like sectional
Mhm.
deletions are because either the legislation was passed
Right.
or to your point, they're trying to consolidate or better organize the document. I think actually most of it is that it actually has been passed.
Okay.
Some of it's just language cleanup, the little bits here and there, I believe are more just cleaning up the language. With respect to the weight exemptions, there's a ton of exemptions that are out there. So I think that in general, what they're trying to say is just stop altogether. I mean, at some level, it doesn't matter who's driving or what the purpose is, short of an emergency. It's still, well, even with an emergency, it all weighs the same at the end. It's still having the same impact. And what we're seeing is that industry after industry after industry is coming forward, whether it's agricultural or it's the fuel oil or it's, you know, next up, whatever it may be, that are all asking for seasonal weight exemptions. At the end of the day, it's pretty much passenger vehicles that are all that is going to be left. And it's like, well, that's not really the issue anyways. So
Interesting, because I don't think that's addressed in this document, the proliferation of exemptions. I didn't get that. This was about where it gets posted. So that instead of posting the restrictions serially.
oh, you are correct on this part of it.
So what you've just described, I don't think is mentioned in here, Cheryl. I
Okay.
think that's a really important
Yeah,
point to make. Because as the ag exemption here shows, a constituent gets the ear of a legislator and suddenly there's a bill introduced and boom, Cheryl gets to be exempt
Right.
from all these restrictions. So Matt's ready to pounce.
yeah, you are correct. As far as the way this reads here, that does get to just how it's being posted.
Right.
And Matt can certainly address that. Basically, the law is written backwards.
I mean, if that's okay, fine. I need you folks to guide us in when we raise the flag on this stuff.
Matt McDonnell, Director of Engineering. On page 14 and 15, you'll see kind of that transportation permits theme. As Cheryl mentioned, under the oversized, overweight permits, that heading there, there are numerous exemptions for emergencies, specifically for utility industry vehicles. So if there's a DTE or AT&T that's going to affect service for folks, particularly a lot of times we'll hear 911 service that they or if there's an emergency as it relates to gas or a pipeline, then of course they have to react and do what they need to do to address the emergent issue. So that there are exemptions built in there. I think that we just need to be aware of what, and CRA does a really good job of letting us know if there's a lobbyist for a certain specific group of folks that are going to go after their exemption. So, and then if they are, you know, and if there's issues, we can go testify if need be. Going down to the seasonal weight restrictions, yes, there's always the debate on how does one know if there's restrictions placed on roadways. And CRA has done a great job of having an app, websites. It used to be you had to post it with signs. And you can imagine the amount of effort that was put as a burden on road agencies to respond to the thaw, essentially. And really, we're trying to react very quickly. So it moved to more, hey, each road agency needs to have a list or a map of what roads are impacted as with seasonal weight restrictions. So how you notify folks, I think, is oftentimes a topic that we hear about. But it's, in my opinion, folks know, they just.
And isn't it written backwards, Matt, where you're posting your list of roads to be restricted as opposed to just posting the ones that
We
it'd
have
be
both.
easier? We do,
Yeah,
but the
we do both.
we're overdoing it
Yes.
because we.
Over communicate.
Over
Our
That's
communicate.
where Washtenaw County.
Yes, yes, exactly,
over communicate.
right.
Yeah, and I do notice now that you've drawn my attention to it, if looking up in the middle of that page 14, the purple, it does say that we oppose legislation that would exempt vehicles. But if you say there's already a long list, I don't know whether we say.
With oversized and overweight, there is a long list of exemptions, I mean loggers, agricultural,
Okay,
gravel trains at times, so there are nuances that law is very complicated. And then you have the emergent situations.
Right.
So there's different parts of the law that can get quite confusing, and that's one of the reasons we have our waymasters go to class every year to make sure that they have a very good understanding that typically is put on by the state police, the commercial vehicle enforcement folks, and changes to the law get updated, so.
okay,
Yeah, on the other part of it, Commissioner Fuller, just imagine they want you to publish the list of the restricted roads. We have 1,600 miles of roadway. Only a small subset of that for us are all-season roads. So instead of publishing a long list, including subdivision roads and whatnot, here's where you can't go. It's a lot easier to post, here's where you can go. And that's really what they're getting at with this.
and that's what we do here.
We do both.
We do both.
We do
And
both, okay.
we also maintain a truck operator's map.
Okay.
That can be paper and also on our website.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank
So
you,
I
Matt.
mentioned a couple sections that were deleted. No concerns, right? Page 6, 7.
Right, I believe that has been incorporated into the law.
Okay, so we're good on that one. Page 8 and 9, rural STP.
I would have to double check that one.
And I can give you this list to look at afterwards, if that's easier. On page 19, there's a TEDF category D section that's deleted.
Yep, I believe
And you guys know this funding maze better than I ever will.
yes, and I believe that again, that's been addressed.
Okay. What I didn't see, correct me if I'm wrong, is any reference made to the work zone speed enforcement.
I don't see anything in there with respect to worker safety.
I would like to see that addressed. I'm not a genius to know exactly all the elements that should go in there, but I want us to take a stand on that. I saw this morning that San Francisco has an automated ticketing system. You're going 11 miles over the speed limit. The little eye in the sky knows, and you're going to get a ticket. So it's not just here that we're talking about that. And I know MDOT has a program. Was that
That's
implemented?
recently passed.
Right, to do that, but that's only on MDOT project work zones.
Correct.
Right, and I'm really concerned about what I'm seeing more locally too, Jeff.
That the cameras in the work zones?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Yes, and I don't know how other places are handling it, but I really believe we need to speak loudly on that point, because I don't know who else will.
Madam Chair?
Question, or you're just putting your pen in your pocket, okay. What else? Commissioner McCollum?
Yeah, I know at the Commissioners Committee, we have something on the seminar in October
Okay,
about
Great.
work zone safety.
okay.
I'll be there.
It's going to be expensive, right, to implement anything like this, I would think. And the integration of the cameras in the cars and whoever has the right to issue a ticket and how that gets done. And I don't want people not feeding their kids because they got a citation for going a mile over the speed limit, but there needs to be something done and enforced.
Well, it'd be nice to monitor how that does take place at the state level, and that may be a good reason why it is happening with Michigan State Police and MDOT. And, you know, and they've got the resources to be able to do that, but to take that to the county level or the local level, is certainly worth investigating or at least watching.
Mr. McDonough?
Yes. Just on that point for, a lot of states have that camera and ticketing system. Currently, Michigan does not. And I think law enforcement is reluctant for whatever reason. There's case law out there. But right now, Michigan, you cannot issue a ticket using video cameras.
Right.
Other than what
Other
is
than,
trialing
correct, exactly.
in the work zone.
Yep.
So hopefully it will be an incremental step. It'll be a successful program. I absolutely support that endeavor and hope to see that on local road system. So I'm hopeful that we can show and demonstrate that through MDOT that this works and it's a good way to do that. And that can actually, because you hear speeding a lot, even without a work zone, and one way to address it is enforcement. And if we have the ability in the state of Michigan, like other states, do it with technology, I think that's a great way to do it.
And I
Right.
think, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
go
no, I
ahead.
just was gonna say, building on what Matt was saying, for example, red light running is one that you see a lot of states have, they actually have legislation and they allow for enforcement based on cameras for running red lights.
Mm.
That is not permissible in the state of Michigan, and that's come up multiple times. And our legislature has historically said that there's the concerns about personal liberties is outweighing the benefits of the safety.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
I'd still like it in our document because I think there's a case to be made, and I think
Agreed.
Yeah, this is a good
depending on the
example.
configuration of the legislature
Yep.
going forward, there may be an appetite.
Red light running is another one.
Mhm.
You know, we have a lot of cameras at intersections,
Mhm.
but in Michigan, we don't have that technology.
Mhm. And I know we
available to
have,
us.
don't we have an agreement with the sheriff's department
Do.
on our cameras?
Right. We do.
We do.
Okay. We probably don't want to broadcast that. So anyway, so I feel strongly about that.
Yep.
Do we ask Denise about it in August? Do you give Scott a heads up that Fuller's going to pitch a fit, or how do you? You're recording this, aren't you?
Maybe that was the heads up.
Okay,
I can certainly talk to Scott.
I'd like your advice.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
okay. And is there something in here about electric? Yeah. EVs are on page 3, it looks like, addressed there, electric vehicles. So that's all I had, my notes from those. Anybody else got highlights and notes in the margin and no? All right, if there's nothing further to share in terms of the legislative priorities, I'd ask, is there anything else people want addressed or to raise? Or
Just a comment.
certainly, Commissioner Smurf.
I'm just hoping that the distracted driving legislation does protect people in work zones. It's not a comment.
Yeah, I don't know how you, well, right, the logistics of enforcement
That's
are
what
challenging.
I'm hoping
should
it
we
helps.
say?
Yeah, the hands-free.
Yeah.
It's, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Commissioner McCollum.
And at the seminar in October, it's called Work Zone Safety, why we need to worry about it. We're going to have someone talk about it. How can the road commission be even more protective of our employees? So
And that meeting would be what meeting?
it would be the commissioners conference in October 22nd,
Okay,
starting October 22nd, going to October 23rd. And it's hopefully everyone can make that one.
where is it this time?
It's going to
Is it Mount Pleasant
be
again?
Comfort Inn and Suites Conference Center, Yes, Mount Pleasant.
Okay. Well, at least it's not in Marquette. I'm sorry to my northern friends. Anything else? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Second.
Aaron, if you would please call the roll.
Commissioner Joanne McCollum,
Yes.
Commissioner Jeff Smurs,
Yes.
Commissioner Rod Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Gloria Yamas.
Yes.
And Commissioner Bart Fuller.
Yes, we are adjourned.